there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. There's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life. Hi friends, how are we doing? Welcome to SassafrasCast. We are getting started a couple minutes late today because such is my life at the moment. Maybe y'all can relate. I know I'm not the only one. As I record this, it's June 18th, 2022, and we left Mercury retrograde like a couple weeks ago, but I know I'm not the only one who's like, but did we leave Mercury retrograde? It's just a wild time at the moment, and I think so many of us, although our lives, for many of us, are majority back to normal, there's a lot of new normal too, right? There's a part of us that recognizes there will never be the normal we knew before the COVID pandemic. No matter how much we return to kind of systems and processes that were previously in place that we had to put on pause, we're never just gonna be the way we were before because we've been through it. You can't undo it. And that is going to be something I talk about a little bit during my topic today, which is definitely on the like psychosocial witchcraft end of the spectrum. I want to talk to you today about surrendering and letting go. Hello to my patrons and friends who are hanging out in the chat. I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for tuning in on YouTube. Good morning, Savannah. Good morning, Grayson. How are you? So let's launch into the episode. For starters, usually I go right into my little hello and welcome to SassafrasCast. I never did that. This is going to be a little bit of a departure, this episode, and one that I may stick with. But for form's sake, hello and welcome to SassafrasCast, a podcast full of witchy insights to help you lead your sassiest life. I am Rorie Kelly, a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In just a moment, we are going to begin the Witchy Weather Report, but first, a shout out to my patrons. If you didn't know, you can support this podcast at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more. I record these episodes live, and my patrons get a private YouTube link before each one so they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and share their own comments and thoughts, and get them into the episode in real time. They also get access to my Discord server, where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful, and a shout-out in each episode. Here we go with the shout-out. Thank you, Amanda Little, Patty Bell from SoulShepherd.love, Rachel Miller, Anti-Fragile Tarot, Grayson, Savannah Tillett, B from Whimsical Solace, Millie Orozco, Ruby, Rebecca Jones, Brittany, Hannah Westlock, and Brittany Campbell. I'm so grateful that you are in my world. Today we are going to be talking about surrendering and letting go. And before I break into the main topic, which I have so many words on, as usual, I am going to do the Witchy Weather Report, as well as make an announcement. This is kind of a time-bound announcement for folks who are watching this in real time and or, like the day it comes out. This month, the Witchy Weather Report will be postponed into the first week of next month. And the reason is because it's Pride Month. I am running a Pride Festival locally here on Long Island on Saturday the 25th, which would usually be the day of the Witchy Weather Report. And I can't do both things because I lack the ability to duplicate myself thus far. So I decided I'll just postpone I don't have to cancel it. I can just postpone the Witchy Weather Report, and it'll be the first Saturday in July. So we'll still be getting that Witchy Weather Report, but it'll be a week after the fact. Today, I'll be doing this segment with our old friend, the Everyday Witch Tarot. And if you know me, if you've tuned in regularly, you know I've talked about this deck being my go-to deck when things are a little friggin' over my head. And I'm just going to be real with you people because I don't believe it's helpful for me to not be real and kind of Instagram airbrush my life. I'm a little over my head. And the Witchy Weather Report, the Everyday Witch Tarot is a deck that I turn to because it is encouraging. It's full of images that are kind of just realistic enough to feel very accessible to me. I like some realism in a tarot deck personally. Not everyone feels that way. And yet also whimsical enough and kind of cute enough to feel like homey and safe. I remember when I was a little girl and my grandmother read my tarot cards for me. I don't think I was such a little girl. I think it was like 11 or 12, like old enough to feel like I'm not a kid, Grandma. But she read with a deck of major arcana only cards that she had done herself. She had drawn herself on watercolor paper. And I remember her saying to me, this is always the deck I use for children, for my grandchildren, because nothing really bad can happen to you with this deck. That was her intention, and she put it out into the world because she didn't want to read for a young person and have it lead to, have it be the kind of reading that really like maybe gave them something to grapple with that they weren't yet emotionally equipped for. And as a grandmother, she didn't want to see anything really devastating in my cards, like really understandably, you know what I mean? And that's how I feel about the Everyday Witch Tarot. It's not that the bad stuff's not in there, right? It's not that you can't get the card that like knocks on your door and says, hey, you need to wake up. It's not that you can't get the Tower or Death or any of those cards. They're in there. But they're not in there in such a way that it like picks you up and throws you across the room with the truth, right? This is the card that sits you down with a cup of tea and says, hey, let's talk. So that's why this deck is such a go-to for me in times of crisis, in times of extreme stress. So I'm going to be pulling a card for the Witchy Weather Report from that deck. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit about the sun and the moon and what they're doing at the moment, and let that lead us into our topic today, which is surrendering and letting go. One of my favorite and least favorite topics, a topic that is, I guess you would say, a frenemy of mine. If you're tuned in for the live chat, if you're a patron, remember to click through to YouTube. I think you can click the YouTube icon on the bottom right hand of the video. If you kind of hover over that place, you will see it. And if you click through to YouTube, you'll be able to participate in the chat. And I want you in the chat. For me, part of this isn't just me going like, oh, it's another way to give my patrons a benefit. It's also that I really like the conversations that we all have together in Discord. I really enjoy the conversations that come out of us being connected in community with each other. And I think that adds something to the episodes. I am not the kind of person, although I am a loner and I like to create independently, I'm not the kind of person who feels that like, all I want to do is share this didactic experience with you. I really feel that we are blessed by multiple perspectives, and that whenever somebody says a comment that isn't something that was like in my notes for the episode, it really makes the episode better. So come on down, hang out, feel free to leave your thoughts, questions, ideas as the show goes, and periodically throughout the show I'll make take a pause and review those. For now, let's get to the Witchy Weather Report of the moment. This is the section of the show where I pull a card and kind of let us all know what our best vibe is for the coming weeks. That's really my intention for the card. It's not so much like what's coming up, what can we expect, because I don't personally think it's helpful to pull a card that's like, what can we expect? If that card is something like the Tower or Death or something, and it's going to cause you more stress than help. Right? I don't think it's actually helpful to be like, oh, guess what? Like that tarot meme, like, girl, you're in danger. Nobody needs that. That doesn't make anyone their best selves. No one's like, oh, I'm in danger. Now I know what to do. People are like, oh, crap, I'm in danger. And they panic, which tends to make things worse. So I prefer, especially when I'm doing a single card reading, to make the card about what should our approach be? What focus should I have in order to, kind of give myself the best energy to face what comes in the coming weeks. And especially, I relate this to, if you are a tarot reader and familiar with the Celtic cross spread, the crowning card. Card number 3, and the way I deal the Celtic cross, I know different people lay it out in different ways, but the card that is above the querent crowns the questioner. And what that means is that it puts them in their best light. It allows them to be their best selves. It allows them to go on their journey in the way that is for their highest good. And so I always pay extra special attention to that card because I'm more interested as both a reader and as a querent in what I can do and what I can lean into than on like, what is fate going to dish out? Because we have control over what we do. We don't have control over what fate dishes out. Now that I've given you that lecture, let me pull our card for us. So the Witchy Weather Report has spun off into its own podcast. You will be hearing in about 2 weeks the next episode of the Witchy Weather Report, where I pull a card and then pull cards for anyone who asks in the space of 1 hour. And that'll be not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, live on all my social media channels. Unlike SassafrasCast, which goes live to my patrons and then gets, sent out to all the podcasting places, this is live for everyone. So you can always tune in for the Witchy Weather Report. It's usually the last Saturday of the month. In this case, it'll be 1 week delayed, so it'll be the first Saturday of July at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on all my social channels, anywhere you find Sassafras Tarot. Let's pull a card for our coming month. The Emperor is our card today. This is kind of funny to me because as I was shuffling, I kind of, it didn't fall out of the deck or anything, but I just glimpsed the Emperor a couple of times earlier when I was talking about the Everyday Witch Tarot and kind of the vibe and perspective that it brings to me. The Emperor kind of was like gazing at me just as I was like, riffling through the deck like you do when you're talking about a deck that you love and it's on hand. Let's talk about the Emperor, and let's talk about us choosing to step into our own power. This is really interesting in the context of the fact that I am doing an episode right now about surrendering and letting go, and the Emperor really is someone who is about being in control. Now, I'll share something personal for you. I am a Death Emperor. What does that mean? Well, if you do your birth cards with numerology, the number that you reduce to that is less than 21 is your birth card. So if you take your full birth date, month, date, year, add all those numbers together and reduce them to a digit that is less than 21, you get your birth card or birth cards. And I have 13, Death, which then further reduces to 4, the Emperor. So I think that's interesting because I have been someone who always struggles with letting go, and it almost feels like death is the death card really is about change. It's about allowing things to pass out of your sphere of influence so that the new can come in. It's about being willing to let go and say goodbye. Whereas the Emperor is like Captain Control. Like as a Virgo, I can really relate to this. The Emperor's like, hey, it's going to be my way or the highway. Like I know what's best. And it feels to me that this is really like a topic that I may be grappling with for my whole life, because those are my birth cards. And certainly I haven't stopped grappling with it so far. And I think back to, I can't remember exactly who said it, but there's a quote that has kind of stuck with me that if you are struggling with something, you don't turn to someone who hasn't struggled with it. You don't turn to the expert. You turn to someone who has also struggled with it because they will see you through. And I think about this in really practical terms, like, math. Trying to get tutored by a math whiz, if you're struggling with math, is difficult because they have an intuitive understanding that you lack, clearly you don't have because you're struggling, and I'm actually someone who is good at math. I remember it being challenging for me to try to put my intuitive understanding of numbers and how they worked in relationship to each other into words to help someone who was struggling with a math problem. Like I genuinely wanted to help, but my brain skipped over those steps. And so for me to take the time to learn how to communicate with them was teaching me something as well as teaching them. But it may have helped them more to actually have someone who struggled with it and overcame it and is like, hey, here are the tactics I use to help me learn this, versus me not having had to employ those tactics. I might not know what they are. And so I bring you the Emperor. We're talking today about surrendering and letting go, and yet the Emperor is here to remind us that we need to shine our own light, and surrendering and letting go can never include betraying ourselves. It can never include kind of giving in and allowing our will to be subsumed. The Emperor's will is important, and it is his guiding light. That doesn't mean the Emperor is always right, but it also doesn't mean that the Emperor is like this, narcissistic asshat going around pushing his way through life like a bull in a china shop. Certainly, I would say that's a shadow expression of the Emperor, right? That's kind of the negative side of this card. The positive side of this card is like benevolent leadership. The positive side of this card is someone who really cares enough to be truly invested in trying to figure things out and trying to problem solve. And leadership, true leadership, the kind of leader that you look up to and respect and turn to for help, is not about you. True leadership is, in my belief, servant leadership. It's leadership that looks at the whole holistic picture, what everybody needs from the situation, as well as like what fate has dealt to the situation, and asks, how can I be of service to this situation? And how can I set things into a better position for everybody? That's the healthiest expression of the Emperor, is someone who really, almost like an architect, looks at the bigger picture and says, okay, you go over there, you go over here, this needs to be set up like this. And they're not doing it because they're bossy. They're doing it because they have a vision and see that this is what will serve everybody best. And in so doing, they take on the responsibility of acknowledging that never is there truly a solution that makes everybody as happy as they possibly can be. They acknowledge that there is going to be sacrifice involved for some parties, and they take on themselves the burden of both probably making some of those sacrifices themselves, because a good leader doesn't ask his or her, people to do things that they wouldn't themselves do. They also take on the burden of knowing that sometimes their choices are going to cause hardship for the people in their lives. Because rarely is there a solution to a problem that is just perfect, like Care Bears level happiness where everybody gets exactly what they want. Usually life doesn't work that way. Usually life is a series of, compromises and sacrifices and trying to figure it out and put the jigsaw pieces together to make things work. And the Emperor is willing to take that weighty responsibility on his shoulders. The Emperor is willing to show up for himself and others in that way. And so I'm going to ask you, how can you be a servant leader in your own life? And I want to be really careful. This doesn't mean subsuming your will. This doesn't mean I make all the sacrifices and everybody around me benefits, because that's not servant leadership. That's martyrdom. We don't want to be a martyr. The Emperor is not a martyr. The Emperor recognizes, you can see it if you're watching the video, you can see in his eyes, the Emperor, he takes care of himself. He's got his dog friend. He's got like his cool gold boots. He's got his like antlers, and he's in a throne. The Emperor recognizes that his self-worth is real and unquestionable, and that he deserves to have a good life. And he strives to give everyone that same good life. He is not someone who holds himself above everyone else, but he is someone who recognizes, I might be the leader to be able to make this work. And I want to ask you, how can you be the leader to make things work in your life in a way that is healthy for you, in a way that still acknowledges your sovereignty over yourself and your own life? Because leadership involves sacrifice, right? When we choose to lead in a group setting, it means that we're putting in more time if we're leading well. It means that we're putting in more time. We're putting in emotional energy that others do not have to put in to make sure that it's a good experience for everybody. And the Emperor realizes that in so doing, he also has to level up his self-care. Sometimes we think about leaders kind of and the perks of leadership, and it's a slippery slope. Because we have seen, especially in this country, but I would say in general in history, we've certainly seen many examples of leadership that is, the idea of absolute power corrupting absolutely, and people who are in leadership clearly giving themselves a better situation at the expense of others. Yet I think there are also positive examples of leadership where someone recognizes, like, we all need to thrive. At the same time, I'm putting in this extra work. I'm putting in this extra very considerable energy to make sure we all thrive. And in so doing, I need a little extra in order to take care of myself because I have extra weight on my shoulders. And I think that is a fine line for everybody to walk. So I want you to ask yourself in the coming weeks, where am I in a leadership position in my life? And do I need extra support to make that leadership position work for me? And am I sure that I'm truly leading rather than being a martyr? I think a lot of people, especially people who are marginalized in any way, have a tendency to lead in a way that subsumes their own will and subsumes their own needs. And I don't want us to do that. I want us to lead as the emperor, wisely, firmly, like in our power, knowing that what we know is best because we have confidence in our wisdom and our experience, and also in our self-care, knowing that we need what we need and not being willing to compromise on that at our own expense, because in truth, that hurts everybody. When you are a leader who shows up for everyone in your life, if you're not taking care of yourself, that's going to come back to you. And as soon as it comes back to you, it comes back to everybody, because then you're no longer the best self that you want to bring to this leadership role. So we're really grappling with this in the coming weeks. I'm curious to know how this plays out for you. And actually, if you want to share your thoughts about either this card pull or kind of how this shows up in your life in the next few weeks, please let me know. Like, I really love getting feedback on this type of thing. There's never a time when I don't want outreach. So, find me on Instagram, find me on YouTube, find me on email, sassafrastarot@gmail.com, other social media sites. It's always @sassafrastarot, and let me know your thoughts about this and how it's playing out for you. All right, we're going to get into the topic of the day. But first, hydration checkpoint. Your girl records these podcasts live, and she needs to stay hydrated. By the way, if you're watching the video, you can see just the top of it, and I'll just for a moment, I'm wearing my Fat Feminist Witch shirt right now. It says, ranting, raving, and wand waving. Another really amazing witchy podcast. I'm actually a patron of the page, The Fat Feminist Witch, and she's super awesome, wonderful. And when she came out with merch, I was like, "Ooh, I gotta get in on that." I have this, and I have a Fat Feminist Witch hoodie, and I was wearing this morning, and I'm like, "Ooh, this is good to record the podcast in." Would anyone be interested in Sassafras Tarot merch? That's a thing I could make happen. I've never really thought about it, but we could do that. We could have Sassafras shirts and be our sassiest selves. All right, let's talk about our topic of the day. Today we're talking about surrendering and letting go. This is a topic that, as I mentioned, keeps coming up for me in my journey. I know I've talked before on different episodes about the spiral path of learning, and how we don't learn in a straight line. I think everyone knows that at this point, right? I think enough educational memes have made their way around the internet. What do we do before memes? That we know, growth is not a straight line. Not only are there plateaus, but it's just like sometimes growth is messy. Sometimes you don't realize you're growing until you look back and are years or months later and say, wow, I really grew from that experience. I'm really not the person I was then, in a positive way. I really have become my bigger and better self or whatever. Often we realize it more in hindsight. And something I'm trying to let go of is the need to realize it before that point. I'm an earth sign. I'm a Virgo. I really, really want to be in an atmosphere of growth. That's something that I think is essential to happiness. And it's hard for me when I'm in the messy parts. I think that's probably true for everyone. It's hard for me when it's like, oh gosh, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Is this growth, or is this just me being a hot mess? And right now, surrendering and letting go is kind of a topic like that for me, and has been often in my life. And I'll bring us back to this idea of the spiral model of growth, where we start as we move upwards. It's more like a spiral staircase than a straight trajectory, where we circle around and we come back around to the same issues that we have faced again and again. And these are issues that we are literally meant to grapple with. If you're someone who believes in reincarnation, perhaps even having control over what kind of life you're going to have as you choose the next one. Me, I tend to be agnostic about a lot of these things, but I think it's an interesting idea that maybe that's something you literally chose for yourself to grapple with in this life, right? Maybe that you're like, okay, this life, I'm going to figure this out. And I can tell you, as someone who's very growth oriented, as soon as I say, I'm going to figure this out. The universe is like, oh, you want to work on this? And it like throws garbage at me, at least what feels like garbage. It throws at me like, here are challenges that will help you work on this topic. Like, I don't know, like a tutor giving you a worksheet full of problems. You're like, oh, you have difficulty with this? Well, here's more of it. So you have the opportunity to get real good at it. My friend Nico uses the phrase AFGO, another fucking growth opportunity. Bing. Now I have to put the explicit label on the podcast. But the spiral model of growth tells us that that's not wrong. Like, we're not failing. Sometimes we can have that feeling of like, oh God, I thought I figured this out. And you did. You figured it out at level 1. And now you're coming back for level 2, in the same way that like we take the same topics in, kind of elementary school that we do through the end of our schooling, whether we go through the end of high school or whether we proceed on to higher education. A lot of these topics are these same core skills, reading comprehension and math and social studies and, history. And we learn them deeper every year. We learn years later how much we didn't know when we were learning the first thing, but we didn't have room to process that at the beginning. We learn, okay, remember this rule that you were taught in kindergarten? Actually, it's like this. And when we were in kindergarten, we didn't have the processing ability, because we were so new at it, to understand all of the exceptions and the depth of it. We needed a rule of thumb. And then when we got older, we were ready for the depth and complexity. So on the spiral path, we're learning and learning and unlearning to learn more. And that's often frustrating, and it's just how it is. I'm not in a mental space to kind of be like, yes, and everything's great and we should feel great about it. One of the things I really want to talk about in this podcast episode is making friends with our difficult feelings and allowing ourselves to just sit in them, just be a pool of cranky, difficult feelings sometimes, which is not always okay in the new age community. Certainly in like the manifesting, new thought movement community, there's like, there's a feeling of like, your thoughts are things, and if you think a negative thought for too long, it's going to manifest negativity in your life, so don't think negative thoughts. And that's like, I'm sorry, that's super mean. Like, it's like, first, has anyone ever told you not to think about an elephant? Is the first thing you think about a friggin' elephant? So like, it's really not helpful for these gurus to be like, your thoughts are things, don't think the negative thoughts, don't think them. That's just mean. I'm sorry, that's mean. We don't do that. Your thoughts are thoughts. Things are things. I'm going to come out and say it. This is really, really like basic logic to me. We can think things and not act them out in our lives. And we have a variety of thoughts at any given moment, and we make choices through our actions and through our prioritization about what things continue to play out in our lives. So you know what? You can have your cranky thoughts and you can be a cranky mess, and you can still be a great manifester. You can create the life of your dreams while still being like sometimes a cranky scumbag along the way. Sometimes we just need to be like, I'm just having a garbage pail day, and we need to be allowed to do that because it's a natural part of our emotional processing. And when we're like, no, thoughts are things, I can't think of the negative thought, you're not getting rid of that negative thought. You're pushing it so deep in your subconscious that you don't know when it's there, which actually makes you a horrific manifester, because there is this negativity that you're like, no, it's not here, that is just like stuck inside you, waiting for any moment to poke its head out, because you have repressed it so much. And you're not even aware when it's happening because now it's in your subconscious. It's not a healthy way to live. So one of the things I want to grapple with in this episode is, how can we honor those difficult emotions without allowing them to consume us in a way that's unhealthy? Because I think that's the line we have to walk. We have to walk a lot of lines right now in our lives. So much has happened in the last few years. There's so many memes about living through historic times and how we're like, I want a refund. I don't want to live in historic times anymore. And like it or not, we're all dealing with it. And even as we go through smaller journeys in our life, before we started living in times that felt really historic, we still had to make those choices of how to grapple with our difficult emotions without repressing them to the fact that they inadvertently control us. So this is a shift for me I think, in this podcast, which is I'm making a podcast today about a topic that I don't have the answers for. And I feel is like a daily struggle for me at this moment in my life. And I think it's a healthy shift, and it's something I want to lean into. I want to make SassafrasCast be an ongoing conversation about topics that are big and struggly in this community. That doesn't mean I can't have, like episodes that are about like showing up for ourselves and kindness and not struggling, you know what I mean? But I want us to be able to have an ongoing conversation about these topics and kind of compare notes and make it a communal experience rather than placing myself in this kind of role of like wise leadership and have it always be a topic that I feel confident and skilled about. I don't think that serves anyone, just as I don't think, I don't think it serves us when we put our leaders on pedestals. I don't think that martyrdom and or like you listen to me church-like leadership is ever really a healthy relationship. I'm someone who wants to lead as a peer, like a human. And for me, leadership is a choice rather than like a gift bestowed upon me or a talent or something like that. And when I say leadership, for me, it really means like stepping in and saying, I'm going to allow my voice to be bigger. I'm going to allow what I have to say to get to a wider audience. And I'm going to put myself out there and put these ideas out there because I think they are worthy of it. I really have this ingrained sense of servant leadership in me. And I think that turning this podcast more to the side of like, we're stumbling through this topic together. I'm in it. We're all in it together. I'm not smarter or better than you. I'm just talking about all of these questions because I think just by talking about these questions, we all find answers together. We're all on the journey. Like, I'm not the brilliant, unquestionable, smart one. And I think that I've always tried to kind of put that idea out there, but I recognize too that like, as soon as you're a podcaster, I'm talking to you and there's not a lot of talking back. And I've talked about how I've tried to make that more of a two-way street, how I love when, people are in the comments and sharing their thoughts and ideas in real time because I think it enriches the podcast. But at the end of the day, it's my podcast and it's me talking to you about what I think, right? And I really want to embrace this idea that we're in it together. We're figuring it out together. I'm not telling you what I know. I'm telling you these thoughts that have come up, and I hope that they are going to spark growth for you as they're where my growth is at right now. So that's the vibe, friends. So let's talk about all the things I'm struggling with right now, and let's talk, like maybe you're struggling with them too. I'm struggling with surrender. I'm struggling with letting go. I've had a rough year. I think a lot of people have had a rough year. I don't think it's just me. As we return to some semblance of normalcy, we also realize how we will never be normal again. And we can never unlearn all the things that happened to us and shouldn't. We went through real crisis, both as a kind of society globally and as individuals. We faced many individual crises along the way. Over the last several years, as this pandemic has unfolded and turned into, things like a recession and inflation and, supply shortages and stuff like that have affected everybody and everybody's life to varying degrees. And at the same time, all of our individual lives have been affected, not just by these big kind of global topics, but also, frankly, just from emotional fallout, right? Like every single one of us had to do some emotional processing around this. Some of us were perhaps more equipped than others, right? As is always the case. And, we're all on a big emotional journey right now for the most part because we were left alone with our thoughts for so much of 2020 and had to face these issues that maybe we had put to the side, maybe we hadn't had to think about, for our lives beforehand. And so I think a lot of the change is emotional in nature. I think people have undergone an emotional journey. I know I have. I don't know anyone who hasn't actually undergone an emotional journey personally on a deeply personal level in the last couple of years. And when you think about every single person undergoing a deep emotional journey and how chaotic we know our own emotional journeys to feel, even when it's not visible externally, of course it feels like chaos right now. Of course, even as we're getting back to quote unquote normal, it feels like chaos because internally we're going, I'm still on this emotional journey and I have even less figured out than I had before. Like, oh gosh. And now I just have to act normal again. Like, everybody is in that. So it's a wild time. And I want to talk about surrendering and letting go because I think many of us have been playing a waiting game the last 2 years. I think we've been playing this game of like, okay, when the pandemic's over, I'll do this. When the world opens up again and it feels safe, I'll do this. It's a natural and challenging part of humanity, I think, to kind of delay our happiness and be like, well, when this is in place, that's when I'll do the thing that'll make me happy. But for many of us, it's really been a real necessity, right? For the last 2 years, we haven't had a choice in the matter. And many of those things are coming to pass. I've talked a couple of times about how in 2020, when I kind of lost my livelihood, I also gained a bunch of time. And all the things I had said to myself about when I have time, I'll do this. When I have time, I'll learn the piano. When I have time, I'll be a gardener. When I have time, I'll, dig deeper into my spiritual journey. Well, suddenly I had time, and suddenly it was like time to put my money where my mouth is. Here in 2022, many of us are kind of experiencing a similar thing where it's like, okay, well, we are back to work. The world is a lot more opened up. A lot of things have returned to quote unquote normal. However, it can never feel normal again because we're not the same person that we were 2 years ago. And so now we're dealing with this feeling of like, okay, I promised myself I would do XYZ when we were back to normal, but I'm starting to realize I'm never going to feel back to normal. And I don't even know if XYZ is still what I want. And I know it has to look different than it looked before. And also things keep happening, right? Like, it's not like, okay, because we don't have like new news reports of like thousands of people dying every day, it doesn't mean that our lives don't go on. And there do seem to keep being crises in the world that are, kind of demanding our attention and in our personal lives. And I think many of us feel like, wow, the hits just keep coming. We feel like the world is maybe kicking us when we're down. And I think there is a healthy surrender to be found in allowing what is happening to happen. And I think that that's a distinct type of surrender from surrendering and allowing our lives to become crappy, like allowing ourselves to be miserable. And I think we've all seen examples of both types of surrender. We've seen the person who, seemingly at least, seems to be serene in the face of chaos, who accepts difficult situations and kind of grows where they're planted. And that's very admirable. And we, I think, admire that because it feels so hard, in our own challenges. And we've also, I think, seen people who have been dealt a difficult hand and at some point who kind of just lose the will to keep trying. And this is, by the way, like, this is not me being discompassionate about it. Like, this is me being really understanding, because sometimes it does feel like the hits keep coming in your life. And I think it's very understandable to sink into depression, to have a difficult time continuing to advocate for yourself when all your advocacy seems to fall on deaf ears, and when things seem to keep getting worse instead of getting better. And I think many of us are in that emotional space right now. And so I want us to walk this line of being able to surrender in terms of accepting what is and still being our best selves and still advocating ourselves and showing up for ourselves in a beautiful way in the situation we've been dealt, without slipping into that sense of surrender that's like, well, everything is horrible anyway, I might as well just be miserable. And this gets more complicated when you bring mental health into the equation. We have a mental health crisis like we already did before 2020. And I would say now we have a greater mental health crisis and a greater shortage of mental health professionals. And so it becomes even harder to advocate for ourselves, to practice a healthy form of surrender when our lives feel so out of control and we don't have the helping professionals to help us through, and there's so much stigma attached to it. Like, there's still people blaming people for their mental health challenges and for mental health diagnoses, and it's just, that can contribute to that feeling of like, why should I even try? And I'm here to say there is no magic path where you win. Like, I know I have experienced days where I'm like, why should I even get out of bed? Oh my God, you know? And I have experienced days where I'm like, no, I'm going to give myself the best life no matter what chips are stacked against me. I can still show up for myself. And I've had a lot of in between days. And that's life. That's balance, right? Balance is not us being perfectly in alignment magically, because there is no growth there. That wouldn't be hard. That would just be like, we would just be machines, like algorithms, just automatically adjusting, and it wouldn't be a human experience. Real balance is like the seesaw wobble, you know. Real balance is about going like, oh gosh, I'm really over here, and now I need to try this a little bit, and feeling it out. And it feels different for every person, and it inherently means that there are going to be times when you seesaw onto either extreme. Also, naturally, we fall at different places on the seesaw, right? There is no correct balance for every single person. There are people for whom it is healthier to be a little, like, to have the attitude of like, whatever, it's me against the odds, I got this. There are people for whom that's really a healthy thing. And there are people for whom it is more healthy to be like, I need to accept what comes in life and try to grow where I'm planted. And there's a lot of healthy along that spectrum. And we are going to be moving along it throughout our lives. But I think we can find a healthy spot somewhere in the middle. I recognize that this is not a very witchy episode of this podcast. It's a little psychological. But I think there's a lot to be gained in a spiritual sense. And when I talk about surrendering and letting go, it's sometimes about seeking guidance externally. I think for the most part, for me, it's become surrendering to myself almost. What I want to talk about is that we've been through a lot of crises, and being good in a crisis requires acceptance. Requires it. I want to touch back on our friend, the Emperor, who is in his best aspect, is a servant leader, is a leader who does his very best to advocate for himself and for his people, takes scrupulous self-care, and also applies those same self-standards to the people that he stewards, the people that are, you know, quote unquote, in his care. Being good in a crisis comes from acceptance. You cannot make good decisions in a crisis if you are in denial about the crisis. And I would say, as I have watched myself and others that are close to me struggle with things in our lives, denial has been a big part of the struggle, which isn't to say there's not a real problem to begin with, right? But when we're in a crisis, we can't make a good decision if we refuse to acknowledge the crisis. The first step to solving a problem is admitting there's a problem, right? I consider myself to be good in a crisis. And I define crisis, I used to be a crisis call volunteer. And we define crisis as, this is definitely not their definition, but like how I interpreted it, like big time problems in the short term, right? Like we're overwhelmed, stuff has hit the fan, and we're not feeling good, but also this is not something that it like has lasted for months and months. This is an acute situation rather than a chronic situation. That's a crisis. So being in a crisis means like something just went really wrong and now you have to adjust to it. And acceptance is what makes us good in a crisis. Resourcefulness plays a role, like our intelligence. We have many skills we can bring to a crisis, but until we accept that we're in one, we will use all of those formidable skills towards denying the crisis, and that will make our situation worse. And I found this to be true in my life. I look back to a few months ago. I'm driving to a gig in the city. Everything goes well. I get back to my car. It's 1 a.m, and something horrific has broken in my car sometime in the time when it's been sitting in a parking lot in New York City. And the car won't move anymore. Like it won't go into gear. It will not move in reverse. It will move forward, but you can't get it in and out of gear. It just like that car was not drivable. And it's a Saturday night at 2 a.m. in New York City, which is about 2 hours away from my house by train or car. That was a crisis. And I felt myself in the moment, like just wanting to have a temper tantrum. I felt myself in the moment wanting to make it somebody else's problem so that I didn't have to address the fact that I was in crisis. Like wanting to somehow make it the parking lot person's problem. Like they must have done something. Wanting to wanting to be like, well, but I just had my car fixed, so it shouldn't be like this, like as if that would change the reality. And I saw it in myself, and I was like, I kind of took myself in hand, and I'm like, Rorie, why are we good in a crisis? We're good in a crisis because we accept things. And like, I had to take a deep breath and not repress those emotions, because I feel like you have a right to feel a little temper tantrumy when you're in a crisis, but allow myself to act outside of those emotions. Allow myself to act as if I was not falling apart, and be kind to the people who are in the crisis with me, and start to identify what I could do other than drive this car home, because that clearly wasn't happening. And until I accepted I'm not driving home in my car today, I could not begin to solve the problem, right? Anything I did until I accepted that point would have just prolonged my suffering. So being good in a crisis and reducing your suffering comes down on some level to accepting the crappiness, right? To accepting, well, here's the crappy situation. And once you accept it, you're able to start adjusting, right? You're able to say, okay, well, I didn't want this thing, but it's time to find a plan B. Maybe you already had one in place, maybe you didn't, because some crises come out of the blue and no one can help it. But once you accept it, you're forced to realize there are other resources. And it's really hard if it's something that feels personal. It's easy for me to accept a crisis that's like, what people would call an act of God. Like a tree falls on the house, your car breaks down, through no fault of your own, whatever, something crazy happens that you couldn't control. It's easy for me to accept that kind of crisis. It's much harder for me to accept a crisis if I feel I have any influence on it. And I think a lot of these topics, many people struggle with, things like health, money, our relationships. At the end of the day, we can't control other people. We can't control if we contract a disease or are born with an immunocompromised body, or, have a mental health condition that makes things more difficult for us. We can't control what class we're born into kind of financially. But we do have some level of control over all these areas. And I think these are areas that are really tricky for people for that reason. Because there's a temptation to say, well, I could have made better choices. Because we're humans, right? We could always make better choices. We can always look back and be like, well, I could have handled that better, because we have the benefit of hindsight, and we have the benefit of like knowing exactly how things played out after, and been like, well, I could have done that. And it's very hard to accept, but I didn't, and that's not and also crises aren't our fault always, but they're not always 100% not our fault. And I think that's the difficult place for us, where it's like, here's a challenge, whether it's a crisis or a chronic problem situation. Here's something I struggle with, and I don't know how not to struggle with it. And being able to advocate for ourselves, even when we feel like, well, there's self-sabotage here, like I'm to blame in some way. And there's a difference between us saying like, there are things I could do better, versus it's my fault. And it's my fault becomes problematic because it pushes us to that place of like, well, I don't know how to do any better than this, so I guess I never will. So how can we begin to accept these parts of ourselves that are not perfect, right? We're never gonna look back on a situation and be like, I made all the right choices. Like, usually if we do, we're kidding ourselves, we can look back in a situation and say, well, that was mostly not my fault. Like, we can have self-compassion, right? We can't expect perfection from ourselves, because that's just not realistic. Also, because perfection is not a thing that can exist in the chaotic environment we live in, right? There's multiple influences on our lives at every given moment, and we can't predict them, no matter how much we practice our divination. You know what I mean? I can make a choice that feels really good today, and tomorrow something can happen. A war can break out, a tree can fall on my house, a friend can suddenly have a dramatic life change that requires me to drop everything. I can have a life change that requires me to drop everything, and suddenly that choice was no longer the right choice. We can't expect ourselves to make all the right choices. And we can't expect ourselves to be less than human or more than human. But I tend to think that this idea of like, well, there's a right path to take and I should be able to just always take it, actually makes us less than human, because our emotions are what make us human. When we want to always make the right decision based on all of the current factors, that's us asking ourselves to be an algorithm, which, by the way, there's a lot of talk about algorithms these days. No one's happy with algorithms. It's very hard to make a perfect algorithm too. And they don't even have feelings to mess them up, but we talk about social media algorithms and how they don't serve us the way we want them to serve us all the time. And these are like, a lot of money is put into these things. A lot of thought is put into these things by very skilled programmers. And yet still, it ain't working for us. And this is not like a problem with technology. This is just a problem with life. Life is chaotic and unpredictable. Like, it's hard. There is no perfect response to life. And so I want to bring around this topic to like allowing ourselves to sink into our humanity, to sink into our imperfections, not in a way that's like, when I say sink, I mean like allowing ourselves to be honest about the fact that we're there. I don't mean like allowing ourselves to be like, well, whatever, I'll never be perfect, so I shouldn't try, right? But allowing ourselves to be in a negative space because we're human. And I think about letting go. And one of the problems I have with a lot of the advice around letting go, especially when it comes to things like letting go of grudges, letting go of angers, forgiveness, I think is a really difficult topic for people. And there are people who try to make it easier by saying, well, forgiveness is not for the person who harmed you. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. And it's like, okay, but still it's hard, right? What does forgiveness look like? And I think the healthiest thing when we have these difficult feelings, because forgiveness isn't about us saying something, it isn't about absolution, it's about a feeling we have ultimately, right? I think the healthiest way to look at this is that it's hard. And it's a practice, not a destination. Letting go of anger is an active thing that you're doing. It's not something you do once and done, just like coming out is a lifelong process for people in the LGBTQIA community and any community where you like feel that you have to be closeted. It's not a one and done. It's something you have to keep doing to yourself and others, And I think often the language around letting go of resentment, letting go of anger, letting go of, discouragement, letting go and forgiving sometimes ends with people repressing our feelings rather than actually doing that difficult work of letting go as a practice. I don't think letting go as surrender is about repressing our feelings. I think I've already talked about how unhealthy that is. And I think some of the seemingly empowering language around this topic is actually not empowering because it's not specific and lacking that specific advice, right? When someone's like, don't hang on to anger. When you hold on to anger, it becomes a poison that eats you up from the outside. Well, that doesn't tell you how not to do it. that just admonishes you, It's like the people who are like, how are you ever going to love someone else if you can't love yourself? That doesn't teach you how to love yourself. It just makes you feel like, oh God, I'm hopeless. And I think that faced by that panic that can bring up in us, I think many of us turn to repression because we're in a panic and we don't know what else to do, right? In the same way that I talked about how, as a reader, I don't want to be the person who's like, well, you're going to die. Well, you're in danger. Well, illness is coming your way. First of all, I think there are many factors in life, and I would not feel like I could in good conscience predict something like that. But secondly, it's not a helpful prediction. It's not a prediction that is for their highest good. It is only a prediction that will make someone panic. Differently from saying you're going to have challenges ahead and you have the skills to deal with them, and here's how to keep your head on your shoulders, right? When we hear don't hang on to anger, it's going to burn you up from the inside. Don't make sure you forgive people or you'll never be happy again. Learn how to love yourself or no one will ever love you. Like, these are really terrifying things to hear. And I think that in our terror, when we hear something like that, whether we feel it like, whether we can acknowledge it as terror or not, a lot of people repress. A lot of people are like, I better not hang on to anger. Nope, no anger here. I'm good. I better learn. I love myself. Yeah, great self. Yeah, look at you, babe. I think people are like, yeah, no, okay. And that's a fear-based falling in line. That is assimilation, and it is not growth. And lacking a specific process, people end up repressing their feelings. We end up saying like, no, 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 yeah, right, I can't hang on to anger. No anger here. Get away from me, anger. And that does not get rid of your anger. That pushes it into your subconscious, right? Pushing our self-resentment into our subconscious if we're trying to learn to befriend ourselves, which, by the way, I think is a healthier phrase to use than loving yourself, which is fraught and feels like a pass-fail test and challenging for someone who struggles with self-worth. Anyway, we push things into our subconscious, and what happens is we don't get free from it. We're not free from our self-resentment. We're not free from our anger, but it does take away our control over it, because when we push it far down enough that we can no longer sense it, we can no longer sense it. And that means that when that emotion comes up, we don't even detect it because we have refused it entry, right? This is the crux of shadow work, right? What have we refused entry into our consciousness, and therefore becomes a controlling factor in us, because now it's like a spy, right? Like now we don't even know it's there, and yet subconsciously it is influencing us. And that's when it can manifest as self-sabotaging behavior and really negative behaviors that can be harmful to others that later we don't even realize we did. I think a lot of people who are, have anger issues, who are prone to, things like emotional abuse or even physical abuse, fall under this category. Largely, abusers have been abused. And when someone has been abused and they don't want to be their abuser, of course, there's an amount of emotional repression that happens when you're traumatized, as well as when you grow up and want to ask yourself how to be a better person than the person who harmed you. And when you do this, I'm not blaming anyone, because we're human and we're doing our best, and it probably comes out of panic, like I was talking about earlier. Then we push it into this place of our subconscious where I have watched people lose their shit. I have watched people like really turn into a different person, like Jekyll and Hyde sort of stuff, and outside of that topic become very lucid and be very good people and literally not realize what they have done. And that's what happens when something is so far into your subconscious. And I'm not saying this can all be solved with just love yourself, like self-help. Like, these are situations where it's appropriate and wise to seek out like professional intervention, to seek out a helping professional who can hold your hand through dealing with these topics that you have pushed so far into your subconscious because they're such a minefield for you. And on a less dramatic and drastic level, I think all of us do that to some extent. I think every single one of us has been stressed about something and like snapped and said something really crappy to someone that we didn't mean, but it just came out of us because like we were up to here. And maybe we weren't even up to here with them. Maybe we were just up to here with all the emotions we weren't going to let ourselves feel because it interfered with our functionings. And so, boom, like crap comes out, right? And that's what happens. And I mean, so I feel like I'm doing this cautionary tale thing, which doesn't help us not repress. I think that what we have to be willing to do is sit with the crappy emotions, sit with the challenges, sit with how we feel about it, even if how we feel about it isn't woke or, evolved or liberated, if how we feel, if we were like, if we're judging the feeling, like, maybe we just got to sit. And then we sit in the feeling and we sit in our self-judgment and we just have to let it be. I took a walk a few months ago, and I was looking for some kind of spiritual insight, as I often am on my walks, and I came across a piece of paper that someone must have like thrown out of a car because it was like on a street corner, on a street that more cars than people travel. And it on the paper was written, "I lose control trying to gain control. How important is it?" That's one of the very few times in my life where I have like been like, spiritual guidance, please, and literally got a piece of paper like with a sentence like, here you go. We can't control our emotions. And when we try, they take control of us. We lose control trying to gain control. When we try to control our emotions, our anger, our self-sabotage, our self-resentment, our resentment towards others, we don't succeed in controlling them. We succeed in pushing them beneath our awareness so that we don't have to deal with them anymore. Our brain is like, haha, I don't sense that anymore. We're good here. And then what happens is they come out when we are not fully in control. when our subconscious takes the reins. I want to say that what I've learned over my life is that feeling these emotions is not actually optional. And self-help people who try to make you feel like you should be in control of your emotions are bullshit artists. It's not real. There is a lot of, like, managing your emotions is another phrase that people use. And I understand that that's a step towards, like, okay, we're acknowledging that our emotions are okay, we're managing them. But it feels kind of like patriarchal, like the bad side of leadership. Like, let me manage. Okay, emotion, here's what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And it feels a little like didactic and not realistic, because we can't always emotionally be a manager, right? There are times when we just need to be a human being. And I think that the real process of letting go doesn't involve pushing our emotions away. It involves surrendering to them. And that doesn't mean saying I'm always going to be miserable and I should never try to be happier. But it does mean acknowledging, like, I feel like I'll never be happy again. Hasn't everyone felt like that? Like, we're allowed to feel that way. Saying it won't make it true, and it's harmful to tell anyone that it will. Instead of rationalizing ourselves out of it, saying things like, I shouldn't be sad right now, I have so much to be grateful for. I shouldn't be angry right now. There's so much at play here, and it's not anybody's really fault. So the anger is a useless emotion. Anger is never a useless emotion, and I feel that way. What if we just gave ourselves permission to be sad, to be angry, to be depressed, to be anxious? What if we said, I am sad right now, even though there is so much to be grateful for? I am angry right now, even though it is really nobody's fault. What if we allowed ourselves to kind of sit in our emotional stew instead of pushing so hard to edit it to make it a good emotional stew? I think there's a lot of wisdom to be found in recognizing that we can make choices outside of emotional input, right? That, like, our emotions don't have to become our choices. They don't have to control our impulses. And I actually think that the way to access that wisdom is by acknowledging our emotions. Because when we push our emotions into our subconscious, they straight up do control our choices. Not all of them, right? Like, we're able to intellectually use our willpower and be like, nope, not going to make that choice, not going to make that choice. But then at times when we run out of willpower, when we're in decision fatigue, when we've had a rough day and we don't have any more spoons left to do that, that's when the emotions we've all pushed to the subconscious are like, oh, subconscious is driving the boat now. Let's do some self-sabotage. And we can't be in control all the time. And it's unkind to ask ourselves to, because it's not realistic. And I think that the way that we heal and move through life is in acknowledging that we have these emotions and just being friggin' nice to ourselves. I have a friend who really strongly believes in just taking a day to be a hot mess and cry in bed all day and do nothing other than that. And this is someone who I have so much respect for, and I have watched her dramatically in the time I've known her, and probably before, but I've only known her for a few years, dramatically transformed her life, dramatically transformed her ability to be happy, transformed her sense of self-worth, and the actual, like, day-to-day things in her life into way more supportive day-to-day things. And her secret is crying. Like, her secret is, when I feel like things aren't right, I spend a day or 3 in bed and I just cry. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, She allows herself to sit in the emotional stew until she really understands what she needs to do. Because our emotions are not our enemies. They're us. It's us. And when we make our emotions our enemies, we make ourselves our enemy. And when we have difficult emotions, sometimes we feel like we're the enemy, but we're not. There's no enemy here. There's just a struggle. There's just a hard time. And once we can get to the place of accepting, like, hey, this is just a hard time, then we can begin to solve it. All right, y'all. It's been a real emotional vibe episode. I hope that all of this kind of rambling and thought about difficult emotions, about letting go and surrender, has been helpful, because it's helpful to me to kind of go through it in this way, to kind of, like, talk about a million ideas, throw them into the Yahtzee cup, throw them all out, and see what there is to understand. And I think maybe that's the same reason tarot is helpful. You take, an attempt to categorize all of human experience, all of human emotions, all of human situations into 78 cards, and you're like, boom, here it is. I think it can't help but be relevant, even if you believe nothing else, even if you believe there is no type of divine or other type of spiritual intervention and you're just looking at pretty cards, pretty pictures on cardboard, which many people do, and sometimes I do. I'm kind of agnostic about this. It still can't help but be meaningful. It still can't help but be helpful just to be able to kind of like review this stew of human experiences until we understand what to do better about our own. Let me move into which you got this. This is a section of the podcast where I share one practical idea you can implement in your practice right now. I think I've been talking, and I do this a lot, kind of like big ideas, like big theory, big, like non-specific discussion of this topic. And I want to focus in on a very specific practice that you can use when you're struggling with this thing of like letting go and surrender. I want to give us a working definition of these two things. I don't want letting go to be synonymous with repression. I want letting go to be synonymous with acceptance. And I don't want surrender to be synonymous with accepting something negative. I want it to be synonymous with like allowing what is to be what is. When we say it is what it is, and I know that phrase gets thrown around a lot and feels like a platitude, but I think allowing what is to be what is what it can allow us to have a little bit of grace in a situation. And I want to focus in this section of something practical we can do to kind of work through a topic we're having difficulty with. Maybe we're having difficulty surrendering to the reality of the situation, right? Maybe we're having difficulty letting go of something that we ultimately know we need to let go of. It could be something real, like, I don't know, a person or a possession or a job that's holding us back. It could be something internal. It could be like letting go of our anxiety, letting go of something like self-doubt. And we may know that we would thrive better without what we're trying to let go of. And yet there's a reason we're grabbing so hard on it, right? Like, let's admit we're human. There's something in us that needs it. It's filling a need. I think about how addiction is tricky to recover from. And one of the reasons I believe that like things like 12-step programs are helpful is because they give people tools to replace the hole that previously the addiction filled, right? If you're if you're self-medicating or using some other type of addiction as a crutch to get you through the day, just taking away that crutch is a guarantee that you will fall. And so something like a program, whether it's a 12-step program or some other type of supportive thing, is like, wait, here, you don't have to fall. Here's a different type of support. And sometimes we just need to figure out what different type of support is that we need in order to let go of the thing that we know isn't helping and yet we somehow need, because we haven't let go of it this far. And even if we're smart enough to know we should, whatever, let's acknowledge like, hey, I'm self-sabotaging. Okay, that's what's happening. Let's say yes to it. I don't mean say yes and keep doing it for the rest of our lives. I mean say yes and be like, okay, I'm self-sabotaging here. So how can we work through this type of self-sabotage? I want us to journal or speak if you're more of a speaky person. This can be an exercise you do one-on-one with a friend. This could be an exercise you do like with yourself and a voice recorder, or with yourself and a notebook, or with yourself aloud in your car while you're driving, or aloud on a long walk. If you're in a place that you feel comfortable talking with yourself. I definitely talk to myself way too much on walks. Here are the two phrases. I can't possibly let this go because. I must let this go because. We don't need to like make this a pattern. You know what I mean? We don't need to be like, I can't let this go. I must let this go. It doesn't need to be that dual. Instead, let's write like whatever we're feeling the most. I have to let this go because it's hurting me. I have to let this go because it's a form of self-sabotage. I have to let this go because it's affecting my health. And I wake up in the morning and feel stressed about it, right? Let's allow ourselves to fill in the gaps of that sentence for as long as we can until there feels like there's nothing left. This is a tool to write your way through. And then when we get to when we're like, okay, I have nothing else to say, let's switch to the other sentence. I can't let this go because I don't know how. I can't let this go because I feel like I have so little control. And if I let it go, then I will never be in control of anything for the rest of my life and be unhappy. Let's let ourselves be really emotional and really dramatic. Let's fill in the blanks of those sentences without any self-editing. And let's just do that until we run out of words. And when we run out of words, let's switch back to the other sentence. I must let this go because blah, blah, blah. This could take minutes. It could take hours. I find often when there are things like this that are emotional, that I feel like are a big deep well, like, oh God, if I start crying, I'll never stop. Usually I move through it a lot quicker than I think once I allow myself to just sit in it. And I think about my friend's crying days. She sits on her bed and she cries. And because she's willing to just sit in it, she finally can move through it. So I want to share that this exercise does not have like a winning outcome attached to it. It's not like, and then you let the thing go and you're great again. The ideal outcome is that you understand yourself better. You approach this challenge with compassion and with self-kindness and self-knowledge, but also because you've allowed yourself to sit in it, probably some options have presented themselves to you. Like there is no just solve it and it's over, because you wouldn't be in a place of internal crisis if it were like that, right? But you begin to have resources. When I was sitting there with my car broken down in the city at 1 a.m, I needed to accept I'm not ever driving this car home tonight before I could be like, all right, I guess I could take the train. Okay, I guess I could take the Uber. All right, like I could stay on a friend's couch, before I could identify things that were not the ideal, but like a step towards getting me home, And similarly, when we talk about self-sabotage, things that maybe we've struggled with our entire lives, the goal should not be just fix it. The goal should be kind to ourselves and maybe identify some things that we could try. Because just having something we could try makes us feel better. It gives us back that sense of control that has been so elusive. And being kind to ourselves, allowing those emotions to sit there, allows them to be healed instead of repressed. So let's give it a try. I can't possibly let this go because. I must let this go because. I would love to hear your experiences with this. With anything I share in these podcasts, I really love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, or disagreements. If you think I'm talking smack, let me know. At Sassafras Tarot is where you can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet, on social media, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on TikTok, although it's been a minute. Twitter, YouTube, and sassafrastarot@gmail.com is my email address if you want to write about this. And I really hope you will share your experiences. And if there's something that you'd like to share, that you feel comfortable like with me putting in a future show and talking about that, I would love that. I would love to be able to, acknowledge that and be like, here's someone else's experience, which is, just as important. All right. I want to thank you for spending your time with me today. How are we doing? It's 1:18. I've been talking at you for an hour and 18 minutes. My goodness. If you like this podcast, please rate it and review it wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could take a minute to share it with someone who might be interested, I'd be very grateful. If you would like to support this podcast financially and unlock exclusive benefits, you can do so at patreon.com/sassafrastarot for $1 a month or more. Patrons get access to things like extra content, personalized tarot pulls, a witchy Discord community, and more. If you have a question, idea, or suggestion, you can email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com, and you can follow me at social media on @sassafrastarot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. If you would like to order a reading, you can do so at etsy.com/shop/sassafrastarot. I'll let y'all know. It's a really busy summer, and I might put my shop on vacation mode at some point. So if you do want to order a reading from me, I suggest you either do so through the shop or message me. You can always do that too, sooner rather than later, because there are going to be times this summer when I just don't have the bandwidth for readings. As always, I'm going to take you out with a song. I've really thought about what song I wanted to share with you today around this topic of letting go and surrender. And I was thinking about a song I've already shared a couple times called Full Moon Charm Bracelet that is literally about letting go. But I decided instead to share with you a song called And If So, which I wrote when I was in one of these, honestly, deep in some self-sabotage. And it really was a song that was full of questions. It was like me writing my way through it. which is kind of how I process the world. It is not a song that gives me answers. It is not, as I often try to write, a song, to encourage me and pep me through it. It was just a song like, I don't know. Here's the questions. What do you think? And I think sometimes it's helpful just to let ourselves ask the questions, just to let ourselves not have the answer for a minute. And that's, I think of like the Buddhist practice of like considering koans that have like no actual answer, like kind of quote unquote unanswerable questions is a similar thing. Like, I think there's a lot to be gained from pondering things that maybe there is no answer to. So I'll play this song for you. Maybe some of these questions that have been in my heart on and off throughout my life have been in your heart too. And if it does nothing else, I hope it lets you know that your heart's okay. And we're all going through it. Maybe I love a lie. Maybe I heard it till I thought it was true. I don't know why I wanna be broken into like the Berlin Wall. I wanna know, do you mean it when you sing your songs like that? And if so, how do you hide it when you aren't singing? I wanna be your fairy princess, I tell myself. I know better, dress myself up like women do. I like the way that makes me feel, and I wonder about that. I wanna know why my heart was made for harshest winter, where it goes in the summer when the lovely weather drags me underground and I can't get out. And I'm so alone, and I'm so alone, I'm so alone, and I'm so alone. I want to know why we as a species set ourselves up with inhuman standards and scenes and labels till all we have left in common is we don't feel like we fit. I wanna know, is it better to be down and play along? And if so, why even normal people don't seem happy? I wanna know how you God's gonna work it all out in heaven, where you go when you get there and you still don't fit in. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of this community with me, for learning and growing with me in community. That is why I keep creating community and can't stop, because I think we all grow best when we're honest and open and vulnerable with each other. And if you're here, I know that you feel that too in some way, and I'm really grateful. If you enjoyed that music, please search for me wherever you listen to music. RorieKelly. Rorie Kelly is my name. You can find me on all the usual streaming places. That particular song is on an album called Sincerely Live. It's called And If So. You can also visit my website, roriekelly.com, which I recently redesigned, so maybe you can go see the new design. Or find me on your favorite social media site. I'm at Rorie Kelly pretty much everywhere except Instagram, where I am at Rorie Makes Songs. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk again soon. Bye, friends.